Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Rich Valdez, and welcome to Greetings from Beyond Radio. We have a very special guest, as we always do, and I can't wait to dig into getting to know him a little bit better so that you all can ask your questions in the chat. But before I go any further, you can listen to or watch us depending on what format you are on Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, iHeart, Get Haunted, Amazon Music, Podcast Index, Listen Notes, Podcast, Samsung Podcast, Apple Podcast, wherever Apple devices are available, and Google Podcast and Pandora. So help yourselves to those if you can't actually hear or see us on Facebook or on YouTube, preferably YouTube. And a little bit about our guest that not too many people really know. First, he's a paranormal investigator, but he's also an author. And he's an author of, let's go ahead and post up the book so that you guys can go ahead and look for these books. Yuletide Guide High, Strangeness. The next book is Strange Tales of the Impossible. And the next book is The Lake Michigan Mothman. And it looks like the Mothman has made a move to Illinois. He was also seen on, this is where I actually first saw him, on Unsolved Mysteries, Season 4. They call it Volume 4, but it's revisiting the Mothman. And let me tell you, that was really good episode. You should all watch it. And the second, Expedition X, Season 1. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest for the evening, Tobias Wayland. Welcome to the show, Tobias.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's great to have you on the show. I remember watching that one episode on Unsolved Mysteries, and of course, all the others were they were okay. But then it got to your episode, or your one explanation of the Mothman. And I was like, I'd always thought of the Mothman prophecies, of course, but I didn't realize that the Mothman had continued, because it was usually believed that the Mothman would appear almost as if it was his way of marking something bad was about to happen. And then all of a sudden, come to find out, he's been visiting. He's been getting around since West Virginia and going into other locations. What's your theory on that? And do you think that there's any, pattern to this?
Sure. So, I mean, just up front, I got to say, I don't think that there's really any causal connection between Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant and the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in December of 1967. I know that has become a very popular narrative, but I think that's also largely due to John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, which is a fantastic book. But something that we have to consider is that Keel was an excellent storyteller, and he very much knew, I think, as a writer and storyteller, that he needed some kind of narrative conclusion to this book. And I think that the bridge collapsing tied in with these sightings well enough to be included and give people, readers really, not the people of Point Pleasant, but people who are reading this book, give them a sense of closure almost when it comes to those particular sightings. But the reality, of course, is that the sightings never really ended. They didn't end in the Ohio River Valley there, and they continued throughout North America. Honestly, even worldwide, we've got reports from all over the place at this point. And so I don't think that the Mothman as harbinger of doom is something that really applies to this phenomenon. I think there's a very human narrative that has been projected onto this phenomenon, as we often do, to try to make sense of something that otherwise is beyond our understanding.
Now, there have been a lot of pictures and drawings made of the Mothman. There's one in particular that I'd like for our producer to post up. This, as you can see, is, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's allegedly the Mothman. And it was a photography with someone that took a photo of it. And does this fit the description of what people have seen when it comes to their experiences with the Mothman?
It could potentially. Now that particular image, I think, is probably likelier to be a bird with like a snake in its beak or something. But yeah, often what people will describe is this humanoid creature with large wings. Often those wings are sort of in place of arms. I believe that there are descriptions of said creature that include separate arms, but most commonly it's that it has these wings instead of arms, right? And when it's flying, generally speaking, people will describe it as a sort of gliding, right? And so it's not, if it is flapping its wings, it's certainly not flapping them very quickly. And so in a photograph like the one that you just showed, yeah, I think that would be consistent with the type of movement that people might describe, or that people commonly describe.
Well, we have another one up there, but it doesn't describe what you're saying. It looks like the wings are separate from the arms. And I believe there's another one that our producer can post up. Yeah. All right. So that one, okay, that one, the arms definitely are not connected to the wings. So this is more like I guess a bat, because a bat would have the wings connected to the body and the arms more than anything else. But it seems the descriptions that we get is usually, let's see, they have like feathers versus fur. And, I've heard many descriptions. And in fact, on the show that you were on, I was like, so which one is it? And there's also a few that said they had this feeling like the red eyes connecting with theirs was giving them this sensation of, well, if I saw something like that, I'd feel danger. But they felt as if it was menacing, like it was going to actually attack. And I found that to be fascinating. Have you seen this correlation with all of the eye accounts and also the people you've interviewed that have had experience with the Mothman?
So in the vast majority of cases that represent something that is likely or possibly paranormal, yeah, I think most people do describe this feeling of fear. There's a sort of intense fear bordering on unnatural, really. Sometimes the fear even begins before the sighting, as though
Really?
there is, yeah, like they have this sort of sixth sense that they're being watched or something similar. Now, there have been a couple of witnesses that have talked about this palpable sense of evil, but it's difficult to know if what they're describing is just their interpretation of the extreme fear that they're feeling. And so they think like, well, if I'm this scared, then this thing must be evil,
Right.
And so there aren't a lot of those, but yeah, it certainly seems to be impactful. Again, in those cases that represent the likeliest reports to be something paranormal, there is this relatively consistent fear.
Well, like I said earlier, I see something like that, I'm going to be in fear, because that's, from the description, it's huge. and the red glowing eyes does not help the case. What's the one thing that you would do, your style of investigating, which is very similar to mine, is not only interviewing, but you want to see a correlation between every single person you've interviewed. And if something stands out, do you disregard it, or do you just put it down as a side note because there may be another branch of correlation there that other, people that have actually seen this creature are actually sharing with you that has never been mentioned with all the other interviews, and correlate with the other interviews as a possible side effect or symptom, should I say, of their experiences with the Mothman?
Sure. Well, you have to include everything. So I don't edit out any key part of any witness's testimony before I write about it or relate it on television or in an interview or anything else. That to me it's really bordering on unethical, I think, because at that point I'm not authentically relating their experience, and it's not up to me to say exactly like which parts of their experience are the ones that should be remembered or particularly noteworthy. No, what my responsibility is to present their experience as closely to how they experienced it as I can, and then any sort of determinations we can make from there, great. Now there have been a decent amount of differences or discrepancies in appearance when it comes to this entity or entities, as we've already noted. Now, like I said before, some people will describe separate arms and legs. Some people describe just seeing the wings instead of arms. And what I'm reminded of is when Keel was originally covering this subject, all the way when he wrote the Mothman prophecies back in, I think it was like I think it came out in 75, I want to say. He was already talking about what he described as these ultra terrestrials. And so this was sort of a blanket explanation from Keel to cover everything from UFOs to cryptids to ghosts and hauntings and all of this stuff. But one of their key qualities, like one of the qualities that makes them an ultra terrestrial in this hypothesis, right, is that they are reflective of humanity. That is to say, they appear in a variety of guises based on either our subconscious biases, what we expect to see, or what they want us to see, either based on that or based on some other motivation, right? And so when you see these little differences, I can't help but wonder if what we're actually seeing in these variations is evidence of something that is in fact reflective of humanity, rather than this sort of objective appearance as we would expect to find with other monsters or cryptids or whatever.
And I have to ask, because it's just my curious way of thinking, having been a paranormal investigator for 40 years. And how long has this phenomenon of the Mothman gone back? Is it beyond the 1975, or is it just 1975 people all of a sudden started seeing this? And I personally, just throwing into the mix, it sounds to me, I don't know, it's more a cryptid, but some people have theorized that it's an extra dimensional creature. I don't know about that. And what's your take on that?
Sure. So the Point Pleasant, West Virginia sightings began in 1966. The oldest sighting that I've received directly from any witness is from 1957. So predating the Mothman prophecies flap of sightings. In terms of the nature of this entity, I'm usually much more comfortable saying what I think it's not than what I think it is, because we have so few answers, right? In this case, I struggle with the idea that it could be some sort of undiscovered biological species for several reasons. First and foremost, the description of this thing biologically doesn't make any sense, right? So if you've got something that's 6 or 7 feet tall with only a 12 or 15-foot wingspan that is described as having a humanoid body shape, even if it had hollow bones or something, that's still too much mass for that wingspan to get off the ground. True. And then you combine that with people talking about its mode of flight, where it'll take off without flapping its wings. Seems to just be gliding mostly. And then, of course, you incorporate all of the other weird stuff from glowing red eyes to the intense fear, to some of the poltergeist or haunting sort of phenomena that people will report surrounding their Mothman sightings. And it gets really weird really quickly. And then sort of beyond that too, the places that this thing is seen, they're not remote. And so it's often small towns or on the outskirts of civilization. But at the same time, it's close enough to where a lot of people live, where for there to be a breeding population of an animal that size, we should be seeing them more. They shouldn't be undiscovered at that point, right? Like, we should see signs of predation in the local wildlife population. We're not seeing that. Where would they live? There's not like there's a lot of cave systems in northeast or southeast, like northeast Illinois or southeast Wisconsin, or really most anywhere around Lake Michigan, or a lot of these Midwest sighting areas for it to live in. So that leaves what, like local wildlife areas and wetlands and forests and things. Well, you can't hide in those. There's way too many people around. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for this to be some sort of undiscovered biological species. So I think that we have to be willing to entertain, some stranger ideas.
We have a question out of the chat. In your opinion, why do you think they called it a Mothman and not something else that's a winged creature / animal?
Sure. So that the name Mothman actually began as a joke, kind of. There was an opinion piece for a local paper all the way back in the 60s during that flap of sightings, because some people had, prior to this opinion article being written, had sort of referred to it as like this Batman or something similar. And of course, at that time, Batman was a very popular television show.
Yeah.
And so the guy writing this piece was kind of poking fun at these sightings, and so I don't remember verbatim exactly what he said, but it was something similar to, basically like, oh, this Batman or Mothman or whatever it is. And so Mothman just kind of caught on after that. And it's not really descriptive of what the thing is actually supposed to look like, because almost nobody ever talks about any insectoid features or anything, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually bat-like or bird-like qualities exclusively. And so it's very misleading. So, if you hear that name Mothman and you expect for it to have anything at all to it that's similar to a moth, then you're going to be very disappointed.
Very true. We have a map, and I actually had to take a picture of this, of the last locations or actually where it's been seen. So if our producer can put that up. Now, this is off Chicago. This is off the show. And if you'll notice, there's a cluster right around there. And that's a lot of sightings. Now, I would imagine these have been dated and go actually a little bit more that way. I'm trying to point. Go up, straight up, and to your left. Yeah, that's a cluster right there. I mean, that's a big cluster. This is in Chicago, from what I understand, in highly suburban areas, not rural. Why do you feel it's now making its presence known in neighborhoods? This ain't your friendly neighborhood Mothman, and it ain't Batman. But why? I mean, is there some pattern we should be looking for? What does it eat? Does it hunt? And why would it be in those areas that we just pointed out? Does anyone have any idea what they actually eat? And we'll ask that question later, but I'd like your answer to that map there of all the sightings, date wise, and why do you think it's coming closer to civilization?
Sure. So I believe those like that cluster is probably around O'Hare International Airport, and there have been a good number of supposed sightings in that area, and I say that because a lot of the sightings that have been said to come directly from O'Hare itself have just remained unverified. And so I can't speak to their direct credibility, and they kind of muddy the water somewhat when it comes to comparing them to the sightings where we have people who are actually willing to go on the record and come forward, like we saw on Unsolved Mysteries. But there have been quite a few, even in the surrounding areas. And you're right; those are villages and suburbs and stuff of the greater Chicago metropolitan area. And so there is more nature there than people probably expect. There are a lot of wildlife areas and little woods and forests and things. But you're right; it's by no means remote. And so I think what is likely is not necessarily that the phenomenon is overrepresented in these specific areas. And those sightings, by the way, I think you asked, would have largely come from probably 2018. No, if it's O'Hare, probably a little later than that. So maybe 2020 on.
Oh wow!
Okay. For most of those. And I think what we're probably seeing when we see clusters like that is more an issue of reporting. So what happens is one sighting is reported and somebody else sees that and they go, oh, okay, well, I saw something similar, so now I'm going to report it. Because most people, it should surprise no one to hear, don't know what Mothman is. They've never heard of Mothman. They had no idea that anybody else was ever seeing winged humanoids anywhere. And so for a lot of people, when they have these sightings, they don't talk about it. They don't think there's a place to report it. They don't think anybody else has ever seen anything like this. It's not like ghosts or even UFOs or Bigfoot. Like people don't know what Mothman is. And so it usually takes them seeing somebody else doing it first for them to come forward. And so if you have a relatively populated area like this, where suddenly one person is willing to come forward, then you can have a kind of snowball effect where then all of these other people are willing to come forward too. I mean, since that episode has aired, I've been getting these reports from everywhere, from all over the world, from areas where you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I don't think that it's because suddenly people are seeing this. I think that they've been seeing it for a very long time, probably in a lot of places, but they just never really felt empowered to talk about it until now.
Well, if we can get that question back up by Valiant Thor, I think he's left us, but it's not even a question. It's a statement. He states, at this stage, civilians are too intellectually and technologically feeble to detect, much less comprehend the kind of communication that's occurring amongst much more advanced species. What's your take on that statement?
Okay. Well, I think that it's a possibility. On its surface, it might seem a little elitist or something. I think people are generally smarter than they're given credit for a lot of the time. But when it comes to whatever these things are that we might be dealing with, we have to be willing to allow for the possibility that they are very far advanced compared to us. Like, let's say, for instance, we're dealing with some kind of otherworldly intelligence that we would be to them as ants are to us. Have you tried to talk to an ant? Do you think you could if you had to? I don't think you could. And so is it possible that that is the comparative level that we're on with these beings? Sure, maybe. I mean, I don't have any evidence either way, other than that these sightings tend to be, frankly, baffling. And so the fact that a mystery remains could indicate that there is a difficulty in communication.
If I were to put myself in the shoes of cryptids, I would say we're the invaders. They may have been around way longer than us, and quite frankly, are just trying to, survive in today's civilization. Considering we've been around, but I mean, we've been taking away more and more of their natural habitat as the years have gone by. So in many ways, they kind of had to go into hiding. Now, breaking away a little bit away from Mothman, since you are a all-around paranormal investigator, what cases really stood out to you, other than the Mothman, that really made an impression on you?
Oh boy. Well, there's been quite a few. If we're just, I suppose, picking from anything we've done. Now, the Kettle Moraine State Forest in southeastern Wisconsin is a relatively well-known area in terms of anomalous activity. And so everything from Bigfoot to Dogman to anomalous lights and similar has been reported out of that area. And it's a place that I've been to many times. My wife Emily and I have gone out there, especially with some of our friends who are also investigators, and we have experienced quite a bit. I've seen everything out there from large humanoid shadows moving, through the trees, to actual undeniable mysterious balls of light. We've even had that captured on camera, which is fascinating. And so that's left a big impression on me. I mean, it's one thing to read about something, or even to speak with another human being who has experienced it, but to really be out there, in the middle of nowhere, in the woods, in the middle of the night, and to see something that you can't explain, to experience it for yourself, well, that is something else entirely.
One case that has actually fascinated me for many, many years has been the Bray Road Beast. And you said Wisconsin, and that's exactly the state it's in. Mm-hmm. And I was joking around with a fellow investigator of mine, and I said, well, we would need a worm on a hook. Would you be willing to hold up some fresh meat if we gave it to you, and see if the Bray Road Beast, would just come around sniffing? I'm sure, hey, we'd be in the shadows waiting for it, throw a net on it or something and capture it. What has been your experience also with the Bray? I noticed you said the Dogman.
Sure.
But is the Bray Road Beast and the Dogman both one and the same phenomenon, or are they two completely different cases altogether?
I would, as comfortable as I am classifying anything, I would feel pretty good about classifying the Beast of Bray Road in that category of Dogman. It fits all of the criteria, and so I don't think that's a very controversial take, right?
No.
It certainly seems to. What's interesting about that is the number of credible people who are willing to go on record. Back when Linda Godfrey was investigating that, all the way back in the 1990s,
Yeah.
there were these people who were willing to come forward and speak about it. And you still get some reports, like they're fairly infrequent from that area, but it is in that southeastern Wisconsin corridor. Um, like Elkhorn specifically, that town where those sightings came from, um, where we do get a lot of reports. The thing about a lot of these phenomena, though, is they're not repeatable in the way that, say, a haunted house is, where if there's a haunted location, you could feel fairly comfortable that if you go there often enough, you're going to experience something for sure. But when it comes to things like the beast of Bray Road, they seem to happen in a specific area for a certain amount of time, and then they don't repeat. And even when they're happening, they're not necessarily happening in the exact same place to the degree that you would need to be able to capture them reliably. And so there's a level of difficulty there, that we see across all of these fields, right? But specifically when it comes to the Beast of Bray Road, the sightings in that area are not anything that I think would speak to an ongoing phenomenon. Like I do get stuff every once in a while. I had a very interesting canine track that was sent to me from somebody just south of that area, from what had to have been a massive animal, much bigger than you would expect. And he sort of described some other unusual activity in that area that could speak to some sort of paranormal phenomenon. But it doesn't happen with the regularity anymore after that like initial spate of sightings.
That's fascinating. I would imagine. I always like to find some kind of connection, correlation between sightings, phenomenons, anything. And I find it fascinating that now all of a sudden the Bray Road Beast is not a thing. And I wonder if it goes, kind of like in seasons. The Mothman started in West Virginia and then migrated to Michigan, according to your book. And now it's made its way inward towards Chicago, Illinois. But I'm sure it's been seen elsewhere. But there has to be something to that. Getting a little bit into your history, and I remember seeing this, that since you were a kid, you used to feel and see and experience otherworldly things. How did your abilities develop, and did you develop them at all as you got older?
Well, I certainly didn't develop anything on purpose. Some of my oldest memories when I was a kid, and I mean like 2, 3, 4 years old, would be being terrified to go to bed at night, because I knew when I did that something was going to come for me, And from that time, there are fragments of memories, things like waking up to feel something digging in my sides, or being lifted out of bed, or seeing hands pressing in on my blankets, because of course I would sleep with the blankets over my head. And from there, things progress. As you get older and your brain develops, you're more capable of forming these long-term memories, right? And so, I have much better memories going forward of things like seeing shadow people, or waking up to see what you would conceive of as like a sort of traditional alien gray or something above my bed. There was one particular experience in my early 20s that was pretty impactful. I was living at home. I'd actually moved home to kind of decide what I wanted to do, right? And I'd gone to bed normally one night, and I found myself suddenly awake, and there was no obvious stimulus that should have caused that, no loud noise or sudden flash of light or anything. And we lived in the suburbs, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, outside of Madison. And so there was some light from outside, and from that ambient light, I could kind of see everything in my room. And so I started to look around, and it became immediately obvious to me that my perspective was kind of skewed, like it was off. And then a second later, I realized that was because I was floating like several feet above my bed. And so I could move, but I decided in that moment that it probably wasn't a great idea for me to move too much. Yeah. And so I moved my head to my left as I'm looking around, and I see this figure standing next to my bed, and it just looked like the all black silhouette of an otherwise normal human man, right? And but it's entirely black, like it's devoid of features, to the point where that's weird. Like I should have been able to see some features even in that light, right? And so as I see this thing, I'm struck by the idea that I'm not supposed to be awake for this, and it reaches its hand out, its left hand, and places it on my chest. And I interpreted that as being comforting, but I don't really know what its motivation was. But it puts its hand on my chest, and then I'm lowered back down to my bed, and it just vanishes after that. Like it just disappears in front of me. And so I'm lying there, and I'm on top of my covers. I certainly hadn't fallen asleep that way, right? And at that point in my life, people always ask me, like, well, weren't you terrified? Why didn't you go wake everybody up? I would have been calling the police, this or that. And what you have to remember is that this is 20 some years into these ongoing experiences. And if I had learned anything up to that point, it was that if they wanted me hurt, I would have been hurt by now. True. And that it was absolutely pointless to wake my parents up, because what the hell were they going to do about it? So I just laid there and thought about it for a minute, and was frankly baffled and had no idea what it was all about. And then I just went back to sleep. But those are the kinds of experiences that I've had ongoing, really. And it's interesting you mentioned that too, because I've had almost as many shadow person reports sent to me as a result of that Unsolved Mysteries episode as I have like Mothman stuff.
Wow. Yeah. And it stood out, and I was interested in finding out exactly what you were experiencing growing up as a child into adulthood. And it seems like you had a natural sixth sense for these things. Shadow people have been mentioned forever. And I've investigated many cases with shadow people, and also the infamous Hat Man that children see, the silhouette of a hat and a trench coat. And it's usually a shadow person as well, but it's different from just your regular everyday shadow. I personally have experienced a shadow person myself. I was about to go down the stairs of a friend's house, and I hear boom, 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 and it went right through me. And I just stopped mid-step on to the first step, and just in shock, that thing came right through me. It stopped at the landing, looked up at me, and I was with 1 foot out, and he just ran up the stairs and right through. So I basically just treated it like, okay, I'm not going back down for pizza.
Sure.
So there's a question. What is your favorite thing to investigate? Cryptids, spirits, UFOs, etc.
Oh boy. I got my start with UFOs.
Okay.
The first several years of my investigatory career were spent as a MUFON field investigator, and that's where my interest really started. Because when I was a kid, there was no internet or anything, and so for me to try to learn more about the things that were happening to me, I had to go to the library. Literally, would just ride my bike down to the library, and I would find books by people like John Keel or Lauren Coleman or Brad Steiger, Whitley Strieber, all of these authors, and they would write about stuff that sounded eerily similar to some of the things I was experiencing. And something that also all of these authors would have in common is that they wrote a lot about, cryptids and also UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I got started. I felt like what I was learning from reading that stuff pointed me more in the direction of something like that, like the UFO phenomenon, in terms of trying to understand my experience. It's only later now that I realize that everything seems to be connected so much that there's almost no way to categorize my experiences in just one category. If you're into ghosts and hauntings, you're going to hear me talk about shadow people and stuff. You're going to say, well, that's a haunting. If you're into UFOs, you're going to say, oh, you were an alien abductee. If you're into cryptids or other monsters or something, then you might be like, oh, well, that's some sort of extra dimensional entity. Maybe you saw, Mothman or something. I have no idea. And so none of those are necessarily accurate, right? Like, we don't know enough about these experiences to say that, but they have enough in common where sometimes you get experiences that fit into all of them. And so where I'm at now is it's not so much a specific category of the paranormal in terms of like cryptids or UFOs or ghosts or whatever. I'm mostly interested in what I think would be, I'm interested in everything, but if I have a specific interest, it's in more of what we would term like high strangeness, like the weirder, the better. If you have something that you don't think anybody would ever believe, but you actually experienced it, you can tell me. I'm not going to judge you.
And that's part of being a Fortean, if anything, because you it doesn't mean you don't believe in it. It means you question it.
Right.
And you have to, because there's so many people out there and they have a very vivid imagination. They'll watch a show or a movie that they subconsciously may have forgotten, but put in their subconscious. And then all of a sudden they'll have an experience like sleep paralysis, for example. And one of the things that fascinated me about sleep paralysis is that I actually went through sleep paralysis. I was 15 years old. That was my first experience. And not to talk much about me because this show's all about you, but that was my first paranormal experience because I thought I was dreaming that I was in my aunt's body. She was Down syndrome. She's since passed, but she used to have epileptic grand mal seizures. And I in this, what I thought was a dream, I was getting up from her bed. I realized I was way shorter than I really was, walking to her door. And at the doorway, blackout and the sensation of falling. My mom was knocking, actually pounding on the door, telling me that I needed to go with her because the ambulance was on the way. And I couldn't wake up. I couldn't move. So I had it. Later on, what come to find out was an OBE. That's what got me started interested in the paranormal. And that is what set me into motion when it came to investigating the paranormal, researching the paranormal. I was actually experiencing what my aunt was experiencing. And I actually got there, and that's exactly where I found her, in what I thought was a dream, right at the doorway of her bedroom.
Wow.
So it goes to show you everyone has different paths and different journeys, and it all leads us, one way or the other. But I think it's important for all of us to learn from each other. There's another question. Can you explain to the listeners who may not know what is a singular Fortean?
Oh, sure. So the Singular Fortean Society, and so Singular Fortean is a shortening of the Singular Fortean Society. So we end up using Singular Fortean for like our website's internet handle a lot of the time. But the Singular Fortean Society is an organization that my wife Emily and I started back in 2016, and it is in investigatory and journalistic exploration of the paranormal. And so we investigate things. I will write news articles about the paranormal. Obviously do like television appearances, conference appearances, write books, things of that nature. But the way that we approach this stuff is from a Fordian perspective. And so you've probably, been wondering what that word means if you're not familiar with it. And it comes from Charles Fort. And
Yes.
So Charles Fort was an early 20th century collector of weird news stories. And he would collect these weird stories from all over the world, and he would compile them in these volumes that he would then, in which he would then sort of speculate about various connections and what might be behind it all. And so he had a very holistic approach to weird subjects. He was not averse from comparing, ghosts and hauntings to UFOs. He was an early proponent, actually, of like the extraterrestrial hypothesis for certain strange events. He coined the word teleportation.
Really?
A lot of people probably don't know that. But one of his most famous quotes is, "One measures a circle beginning anywhere." That is to say, by studying any aspect of the paranormal, we can understand something about all of it, because there seem to be so many commonalities that every part of this must be related in some way. So by studying ghosts and hauntings, we might understand something about UFOs. And by studying UFOs, maybe we learn something about cryptids, because everything seems to be so connected.
Gotcha. I have had many people ask me, so what got you started on the Mothman in the first place? Was it people coming to you, or did you start doing research on it out of just pure interest? How did that get started for you?
Sure. So, I had an interest in Keel's writing from a relatively young age. I think I probably read my first John Keel book in like 8th grade or something. But I didn't have a heavy interest in investigating the Mothman specifically until 2017. And it was in the spring of that year that a trio of sighting reports out of Chicago came through the Mutual UFO Network case management system. And at that time, I was no longer working with MUFON, but I saw them regardless. And I thought that it would be an interesting story that I could cover for our website, because I was writing news articles for the Singular Fortean Society. And so I covered these sightings. There wasn't a lot of information about them. I talked to Sam Moranto, who was the state director for MUFON for Illinois. And they weren't really able to follow up on them very well. The witnesses really only communicated through email, and they exchanged maybe one or two emails, and that was it. And so I didn't think this was going to go anywhere. I thought that this would be just a one-off thing. I would write an article about these three sightings, and that would be it. But instead, what happened was reports just kept coming in. And instead of MUFON, they started to come into the websites Phantoms and Monsters and UFO Clearinghouse. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do my due diligence here, I need to reach out to the people behind those sites and interview them separately. And so I did, Manuel Neverett and Lon Strickler. And so I talked to them and sort of covered their perspective, which I thought to be fairly reasonable at that time. They weren't saying anything outrageous about what they thought any of this was. And from there, I kept covering these sightings, and then we started to get our own sightings. And it just made sense given our proximity to where everything was coming in, because we've got, the largest number of sightings have come in from the Chicago metropolitan area, like the greater Chicago metropolitan area, out into the suburbs and small towns of northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. But there have been sightings from Indiana and stuff too. And I live in southern Wisconsin. And so, my wife and I were very close to where this was all happening. And it was very easy for us to be able to get down and actually go to sighting areas and speak to witnesses directly and stuff. And so it just made sense for us to become a part of it. And then the sightings, they never really stopped. And this just is this ongoing phenomenon. And I mean, I'm not going to quit until it does. So here I am. As long as this keeps happening to people, I'm going to keep covering it.
Well, if I know that if I do have an experience with what I consider to be a Mothman, I'll be calling you. Hope you don't mind coming all the way down to Florida.
It sounds really nice. I'd love to.
You wouldn't like it now. It's very, very hot here, but it gets a little bit better in the November, December, January month, and it's not as bad. But all we got here is the skunk ape. I'm sure you've heard of the skunk ape, maybe rumblings about it, but it's our version of Bigfoot. And that's something that I've never investigated. I'm more into the ghosts and, being a demonologist as well. That's my forte. Although I have had one UFO experience, and that was weird because I know it wasn't a helicopter. I was in a building that overseeing the ocean, and a light just did this and appeared, I would say 3 miles offshore, and it was shining a spotlight into the ocean. Think of Cocoon. Mm-hmm. And it was stationary for 45 minutes. And then it just went blink and disappeared. The light, everything, it just disappeared. And it was myself and a few others that were staying in that apartment. And we were like, what the hell was that? Because, if it's a helicopter, noise travels over water. We didn't hear any choppers. We didn't hear anything at all. I'm telling you, this is ridiculous. I just said, it's an unidentified flying object. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was shining a light down into the ocean for a good 45 minutes. Was it collecting dolphins or some samples? I don't know, but it made no noise whatsoever, and it just disappeared. So I guess you could say I'm right there with you. Where it's funny. You don't go looking for it, much like with the Mothman. And look at the road it's led you down. So it's usually the things that we don't seek that end up, discovering these things. We have, let me see if it's a statement or question. Either way, from Eileen Jones, I feel people will see much more if they would just go outside and look up. I agree with that, but nowadays there's so many satellites being thrown up there, and it's kind of hard to discern what you're actually seeing. What do you think about that statement?
I think it's spot on, really. I think that now you make a good point about our skies being busier than ever, and they are. But if you are an avid sky watcher, you'll learn to recognize stuff like that. Like seeing the International Space Station, it looks really weird, and it's super bright and it can move pretty quickly. And so if you don't know what you're looking at, you might think you've seen a legitimate UFO. But if you're one of those people who actually goes outside and looks up often, chances are you'll be able to identify it fairly readily, which is great, because then if you do see something that is truly anomalous, you'll recognize it for what it is. So absolutely, I think if people were paying more attention to their environment, they'd probably see a lot.
You know what, Tobias, we're close to that time where we have to say goodbye, but I will say this: I am definitely going to be going on to your website and getting me a book. Is there any way that I could possibly get you to autograph it for me?
Absolutely. Actually, anybody who wants autographed books, they are available through our website. If you go to singularfortean.com/books, we sell autographed copies through there. If me adding my graffiti to your book is not a priority, you can always go to someplace like Amazon to buy them as well.
No, I'd like your graffiti on it, with all due respect. There's the website for everyone, www.singularfortean.com. merchant books, go straight to that and get your books. There's 3 to choose from. I know I'm definitely getting the Mothman. That's for sure. And I will request and when I purchase it that, hey, remember me? And is there any other website that people can follow you on social media so that they can keep track of, whatever other shows or any other events that you're going to be making appearances on? You can share right now with us.
Yeah, definitely. So in addition to the Singular Fortean Society's website, you can always follow the Singular Fortean on social media at Singular Fortean on TikTok, Instagram, and X, or Singular Fortean Official at Facebook, or if you just want to follow me, at Singular Tobias on Instagram and X, or Tobias Wayland Author on Facebook. And between those, you should be able to keep up with everything. I do have a podcast that I've been doing with a friend of mine, Ashley Hilt, as well. So look for On Wednesdays We Talk Weird if you have any interest in that. But between all of those things, you should be able to keep up with me pretty well. I do have some appearances coming up later this year, but if you're following me on social media, you will definitely be informed about all of those.
And for those of you that have not seen his episode on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, get yourselves over there. It's the last episode. It's, in my opinion, the best one out of all of them. And it kept me gripped. I if you could, imagine me sitting there with popcorn just going like this. That was me. Okay. It kept me that interested. So this 54-year-old man was not bored. That means that was a good episode. So thank you so much, Tobias, for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. And I think a lot of our audience has learned from you, and I hope people start looking you up, and you can expect me to buy a book from you very, very soon. And I do need your graffiti, as you like to call it.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for you being on the show and having the time to give us. I'm sorry about last week, but hey, Wi-Fi comes and Wi-Fi goes.
Absolutely. Not a problem.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Tobias Wayland. You can follow him, where in the 14th. So, I guess it's time for, POD, but I don't know if my producer. Oh, yeah, she did. Yeah, she got it. Look at that. Wow, that was so cool. I just said POD and it was like, woo, genie. Boom.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah, it's so cute. Yeah, so
should music to it.
I know. Okay, you know what? I love this interview because he's well-rounded. Tobias has he has an interest in everything underneath that umbrella called paranormal. What was your impression?
He does have that wide umbrella. It was more interesting to hear, one thing from cryptids and then UFOs. It's a wide spectrum that he is very knowledgeable of.
Yeah, it seems like he hasn't really stuck to one in particular. Is he, just because he was featured on Unsolved Mysteries for the Mothman doesn't mean that he's just now the Mothman guy. It's good to know that he covers just about everything under the scope when it comes to the paranormal.
Well, see, that's also the biggest thing. When somebody sees you on TV, you're automatically known as that person.
Yeah.
But once you speak to somebody, you're like, hey, this guy knows more than what he said on that show. I can contact him. There's a spirit in my house, and hey, we can talk about it. It's not just, hey, I saw a sighting of Mothman.
Yeah. Kind of like that show I was on.
The
Legion of Exorcists, and now all I am is a demonologist. Screw the 40 years of paranormal investigating I've done, but
you're just that one guy. Which it's a good way, to get yourself out there of, hey, this is what I do, this is what I know. But it's also good to do podcasts like this to also explain to their listeners or your listeners that I have knowledge of other things. I'm not just that guy that you saw on TV.
It's always that guy, right? It's always that guy. But I actually like Mr. Wayland's approach. He just doesn't limit himself to the Mothman just because he's been featured on one show. When it comes to the Mothman, he's well-rounded. And I mean, he even experienced, he said that since he was a little kid I can't remember what the heck I was thinking at 2 and 3 years of age, but he's been having experiences as long with shadow people as far back as a kid. And, you know, in his 20s, he's having what sounds to me like a mix between a UFO abductee, but shadow guy off in the corner. And I'm like, God, what a hodgepodge. I mean, I can only imagine being in that position. I wonder how you would react. You'd be swinging, wouldn't you?
I would. There's no way. You know, I would go from the floating position to on the floor real fast. It just, nah. Okay, first off, I'm afraid of heights. I don't do the floating thing. So
no. Out of curiosity, Mothman, you go out to take the garbage and you hear this high pitched.
I'm bringing a bug zapper next time I go outside. Okay.
It better be a big bug zapper. Let me tell you.
I'll bring 2. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be swinging around and doing the battle cry and tossing it to the Mothman.
A taser in one hand, bug slapper in the other.
Yeah, I hear you.
Not today.
Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of, you know, just not Unsolved Mysteries. There's been other shows that have actually covered the Mothman phenomenon, and I really don't know what I feel about it. I don't know if it's not really that old of
that we know of.
That we know of, but even Tobias said that it's like what, as far back as the early 60s was the first mention of a creature with those definitions.
Which actually coincided with the question, why is it a moth?
Because
why can't it be the butterfly man? It has wings like maybe a monarch butterfly.
Are you going to be afraid of a butterfly man or a mothman?
Yeah, I don't know. I go for, it sounds better, butterfly man. Yeah, make me sound a little better.
No.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Really?
Like butterfly man.
No.
Yeah, no,
that doesn't work. I think it's more ominous, and you got to think. You said that it's funny. The guy that named it the Mothman, he was just joking around because that's kind of like what it resembled, according to what people had eyewitnesses account of this, winged humanoid creature. But no, not the butterfly man. Sorry, that doesn't work. It just because
Batman,
I'll do what the Joker does. The Batman. No, it's not like that. Yeah. Ultimately, what it comes down to is whatever comes across your head when you first experience something that big, because he said it was between, 7 to 8 feet?
Approximately. There are different stories from different people. Some people say that they've seen a larger than normal humanoid, so we don't quite know. There are men and some women out there that are 6-7 feet tall.
I'm sorry, I see something that big. First, I'll try and take pictures of it, but if it starts chasing me, what's that, meme that says, if we were in a zombie apocalypse and we were being chased by zombies, I'd trip you so I could.
Yeah, you're going down. No.
Oh, I'm going down. It's me now.
No, I don't do that.
I love what Laura just said there. Can they be tiny like fairies?
I would be okay with that. But I mean, still, if they're coming after me, bug zapper.
It really is a mystery to me. It really is that there's so many things out there. And she mentioned fairy.
Yes.
Laura mentioned fairy. There are sightings of fairies. There are sightings of wood people or woodlings, and there's just not UFOs, ghost demons, and Mothman and Bigfoot. There is a lot of in between. And nowadays, I mean, we're going to run out of categories, to be honest with you. You know,
well, that's why we crunch them all under the cryptid categories.
Cryptid or the paranormal, like Tobias has it. Yeah, because really it does fall under the paranormal, and the way that
paranormal is unknown.
That's actually smart. So if you could show us that picture, if you can, without disappearing, of the Mothman, the different versions that we have of the Mothman here, because I find it interesting. One really looks like a creepy looking, I don't know what the hell that is.
Let's see what we got here. No, see that coming after me. Nope.
That looks like a bat. That to me looks like a bat, and it looks like I don't know. The wings are the wings part of the arms?
Yes,
it seems to be, right, but there. It should be underneath the arms. Okay, so
should be. He's a yeah.
Okay, and the next one.
But then there's that one.
Okay, that one looks like a praying mantis. Look at the head.
Right there. It's the bug man.
It's the praying mantis man. And I don't know about that one. Even the feet look funky, and the wings are definitely not connected to the arms. So what would we actually call that?
The mantis man. I don't know. I'm winging it here.
So we have Laura Binky Helms, and she stated, "My ex's grandma and stepdad died last year. I swear they're coming as fairies." What's your opinion on that?
It could be possible.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
People have different perception of what fairies are. I've heard numerous over the years. Some say it's like Tinkerbell, that we have these pretty little fairies and they're nice and they give us, gifts and they could do no harm. Fairy circles are good. But then you have the other side of what mythology has taught us, that fairies are not good. They are not pretty. They're, the fairy circles, that can get very finicky at times. If you step into a fairy circle, you're cursed.
You're cursed, or you're stuck in time. And by the time you do come out of the circle, you're very old. Mm-hmm. You're not young.
You're old, or it's a matter of, I've heard stories of that, but I've also heard stories of when you step in, you're cursed, or you lose track of time. So when you step out, you don't realize, okay, I was just here 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And here it is, 3 hours.
Now, here's Jason, and I know him. He's with my Paranormal Clergy Institute. I hear the movie Jeepers Creepers was inspired by the Mothman. You know what? I don't remember. Were his wings underneath his arms, or did he have separate wings?
He had separate off of his back.
Separate off of his back, but it was.
Yes.
It could have been an inspiration.
I heard that as well. I also heard that Jeepers Creepers, which goes into the psycho serial,
which you love
for social media, that was based on a, I don't want to say true event, but semi-true happenings. It wasn't a creature; it was an actual man.
Right.
They just made him into a monster. Again, with that, there's many different theories.
Well, there's always some inspiration behind all of the things that people have seen in movies, have been inspired by actual true accounts, sightings, and whatnot. So we really can't dismiss that too much. I like I said, it all depends on people's perception, and then it either takes off or someone comes along and changes it altogether. From Jason, I feel like Jeepers Creepers was an attempt at crossing the paranormal with horror. You know, I loved the first two movies, but the other movies they've released after that, wow. Let's just say I just had to shut it off. The last one I saw was horrible. The first two were good.
Hold on, I'll be right back while you're talking.
Okay. So, as I was saying, I loved the first two, but I really had issues when it came to the third and the fourth. I think there's a fifth, if I'm not mistaken, and it really, really, it was bad. It was so bad. I was cringing. I couldn't take it, to be honest with you. It's bad. It's, you know, that it's sad when they take a good concept, because for the first time in a long time, when Jeepers Creepers came out, I was so happy that they had finally come up with something original, something different. And then they came out with the second one, and then, but I think it was every 20 somewhat years it would hibernate and then wake up, and it would look for its victims. But that was going to be a hard one to sell, because if you're going to be having some creature that wakes up every 20 somewhat years, and then you got to go into the future, it doesn't make any sense. And I was just explaining, I don't know if you heard.
I heard.
Yeah.
It's kind of like It, the horror movie It.
Pennywise. Not really, it was all the time. Jeepers Creepers was every 20 what years, and I was having issues, and I agree with.
Well, so was It.
Jeepers Creepers
it only came out so many years. Are you sure? Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Anyone in the audience want to contest that? Because I've never really been a big It fan, but I don't think it had anything to do with a time as to when it was around. I think it's because that group of kids in the story were affected, and then started remembering when they all went back. So that in itself is something that we need to bear in mind, that so let's see, Pennywise would only come around every so many years. Okay, all right, well, how many years was it? Like every 10 years, something like that? I mean,
see, that one I don't remember. The only one I actually liked was the original. I didn't like the remake, and I know a lot of people will get upset by that, but
no, you know what, I get it. The original was with Tim Curry.
Yes.
And I get it, but it was a made-for-TV movie. It was very limited when it came to budget, and it didn't really. It didn't.
The remake followed the book. It was very gory.
Very.
It was every 27 years that Pennywise
was that Pennywise or
yes.
or Jeepers? Well, because he commented on both. Just gotta wait for him to respond. It got good Lord, if it was 27 years, I mean, we'd be like in floating cars and things like that. You see, it's that's where they messed up. They say he hibernates for 27 years. Yes. Can you imagine? Pennywise. Yeah. Fascinating.
But so that's why I said it was much like Jeepers Creepers, only came out so many years. Pennywise did the same thing. If you notice in the horror movies and the remakes, especially the remakes, it's every so often.
Yeah, but that whenever, and to those looking to become screenwriters, don't do that. That is self-sabotage. You're going to set yourself up to where you're going to have to, the second movie, you're going to have to come up with futuristic looking things and people in the future.
40 years later.
Yeah, I mean, come on, think about it. So don't do that next time, please. That's the only thing that ruined it for me when it came to Jeepers Creepers, and now Pennywise. Come to find out, that's kind of like lame, in my opinion. Find something else, some other mystique. But again, getting back to our recent guest, Tobias Wayland, I love his approach, and the way he approaches it is with really, he doesn't leave any stone unturned, which is really the way it should be within the paranormal field. I wish more people would do that and would not be afraid of sharing what they find. You know, sometimes what you may think is irrelevant, and let me just throw this out there, what you may think is irrelevant. When an investigator, a detective goes onto a crime scene, they take pictures. They have a photographer that's taking pictures of the area, the where the crime happened, the person that may have been unalived, since we can't say the word nowadays, but and they do that for a reason, because they may have missed something while they were there, some kind of form of evidence they may have looked past and not collected. It's very important to actually have that and look and approach any and all phenomenon investigations with the eye of a detective. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. You have to think also with the eye of a detective. They have to go in being very skeptical. Don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe everything you see. Study it. See if there's research, evidence behind it. Question the people, like you said. You know, question everything. If you start seeing a pattern, write it out. Okay, so this coincides with this. This goes with this. This is what must be true.
And when it comes to that, goes to anything, be it, you know, ghosts, spirits, Mothman, Bigfoot, whatever. You may want to jot down the time. That's why I carry one of these around. When you saw it and when it disappeared. And if it's a reoccurring thing, phenomenon, you definitely got to time, date, everything. I always do that when I go on my investigations and I do an EVP. If I hear something and it wasn't me or it was someone around, I always say, call it out and timestamp it. I don't care if you shuffled your feet. I don't care if you farted. Call it out. You know, it's true. You
no one's going to do that. You know that. Okay. I'm not going to go.
I'll be looking around because I videotape everything, even the EVPs. And
no, someone has a thermal, you know.
Like that, I'm like, that was them. They farted, and I'll point right at them during the video. Just saying, that's what I would do, because it needs to be documented.
I'm not that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I'd just be like, excuse you.
Oh, okay.
There's no pointing fingers here. Not on my end. Yeah, no, wasn't me. Mm-hmm.
It was her.
It probably was, but I'm not going to admit it.
It sounded like Wump.
Yeah.
But whatever. Or Aflac.
Yeah, could be. Maybe the grizzly bear. Now, if it was, I'd be like.
So, yes. What we learned from Tobias Wayland, by the way, if y'all haven't seen it yet, if you don't have Netflix, get Netflix just to see it. I'm telling you, it's really good. Now, I know Jen is not going to see it because Unsolved Mysteries, when she was growing up, was something that terrified her. Dun, 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 dun,
it's
dun,
music and oh. That was not fine. No.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
No.
We look into the Mothman.
No, you don't.
Mr. Stack was terrifying Jen. Can you believe it?
Yeah, he was a scary guy. Yeah,
right,
just his voice though. That was like the most cringeworthy thing ever.
From Jason, I am not super familiar with Mothman, but from my understanding, there was one single sighting in the 1960s. Nothing since on this phenomenon, yet we have Bigfoot sightings and evidence all the time. Well, Jason, you apparently missed the show because there have been, and
Well, there was supposed sightings. It
no,
wasn't
no,
anything
they were
hardcore.
documented, and Mr. Tobias Wayland documented. Now, this is a map of Chicago, and yes, I'm talking Chicago, the city, and the suburbs. You see all those dots there, Jason. We'll have to watch the beginning part of the show. Those are all sightings of the Mothman, and he hasn't only been seen, and it's been recent, by the way, since 2020 on to present day.
Yes.
That's all the sightings right there. And that is what I find fascinating. There's been sightings of him since the West Virginia bridge collapsing, and they called it the Mothman prophecy, which really had nothing to do with the appearance of him. That's what the writer, who was a story writer, wrote it like it was a prophecy. At least that's what Tobias told us. But there have been sightings in Michigan, and I'm actually going to be purchasing one of his books. The Mothman, what was it in Michigan Lake? The Mothman, or Michigan Lake Mothman?
No, it was. Please hold. This one. Yes.
The Lake Michigan Mothman.
Yes.
And I will definitely be ordering it straight from him. He said he'll gladly autograph it. I'll read it and then put it in my box because I'll be moving soon. And then put
you
it up.
poor thing. Jeez.
Yeah,
Those are horrible, aren't they?
I know. Whatever. But yeah, there's been a lot of sightings that have been going on over the years, and they've picked up since 2020.
Just letting you know, you're moving in with me. Everybody pray for Rich Valdez.
Thank you.
Because he'll be moving in with me. And he
So,
has tolerated.
yes. For those of you that are interested in finding out more about the Mothman, bear in mind that this is still something. It's just recent. It's not something that we can actually say, oh yeah, this was something that was seen hundreds, thousands of years ago, and when in all actuality, it wasn't. It was something in the early 60s, and then seen again. And but now recently it's been making its appearances and making its presence known, which is something we need to bear in mind. We're just now, this urban legend is becoming hot enough to where Unsolved Mysteries said, we're going to cover this and we're going to revisit this, and they did. And that's why we had Tobias Wayland on the show. Jen, if you wouldn't mind sharing his information to where people can actually go to the website, and it's www.singularfortean.com, and there you can purchase his merchandise, his books, and you can actually keep track of what he's doing next. He's very sought after speaker when it comes to anything that has to do with cryptids, ghosts, spirits, UFOs, you name it. This guy is a well-rounded paranormal investigator, and I was impressed. Were you?
I was actually very impressed. He touched on things that before the show I was trying to think of questions, kind of pick his brain a little bit about, different things other than Mothman. But he answered just about everything. I was very intrigued at everything he had to say.
I found him to be very intriguing and also chock full of information that we could all use. Absolutely. To be honest with you, and the approach I think that everyone should start doing when it comes to investigating is think Sherlock Holmes. Okay,
well, that too, but in my opinion, the reason why a lot of people, they don't bring up Mothman, they don't bring up the Bray Road Beast. They don't bring out, maybe there's new things that have come out that we're like, okay, what was that? Because we can't, continue to go on what history has brought us, the Mothman, Bray Road Beast, Bigfoot, things like that. What if there actually is a new cryptid? The newest thing, well, no, I don't want to say newest thing, but skinwalkers. What if those have evolved? What if, people people are quiet because it's something that they don't think others would believe.
Actually, the newest thing is the Slender Man. And
That's been many years.
no,
But
really, if you look it up, and it really started off as a social media, thing, and then it became an urban legend, and kids started claiming to see it. But you know what? I'd really like to investigate. I'm just going to throw this out there. Claims of the black-eyed kids. I should have asked him about that.
You have a great time with that. Okay,
No, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I really want to interview people that have had experience with black-eyed kids, because hey, I what are they? Are they vampires? Are they demons? What the heck are they? There's so many theories floating out there. No answers. Okay, I take it you're scared of black-eyed kids.
That's scary. No. Okay.
Just don't let them in. They're like,
they're gonna be knocking on my door, and I'm gonna be running around my house going,
no! Please come in and use your phone.
I would feel bad because I'd be like, look at these tiny little kids.
And then
they got their mama. I'd be like, there goes my phone. that weird kid just took I gotta buy a new one now.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt bad. Here, you want a piece of corn or something, a candy? Or, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad.
What do black-eyed kids eat? Everybody.
I don't know.
Inquiring minds want to know. All right, I get it.
Yeah, I need to know. Just give them a piece of candy like it's Halloween.
Throw Twizzler at them.
They'd be like, "Can we please come in? We're so cold," and I'd be like, "Okay."
Oh, geez. But anyways, we're coming to a close on the show, ladies and gents. Remember, we are every 2 weeks, so it's bi-weekly, and make sure to join us then. If anything, remember what I always say at the end of every single one of our shows: live life, don't let life live you, and peace be still. See you in 2 weeks.